Welcome, Classics 301, to this lecture on Socratic moral philosophy. What does it mean to live well? So last week we looked at changing our thinking a little bit, hopefully, introduced you to some concepts that I think will help you as you understand philosophy a bit further. So now we're moving into the guts of the term, which is Socratic moral philosophy. What does it mean to live well? So the word there is Socratic, Socrates. And hopefully many of you have heard from Socrates. Socrates is a very important philosopher in the Western tradition, and he helps us understand what it means to live well. Socrates lived from 469 to 399 BC in Athens in Greece. So this is a few hundred years, as you can see, 5th century BC, before the birth of Christ. Is our timeline. Socrates is very important for a number of reasons, but perhaps the most important for our purpose is that he was the first philosopher in the Western tradition to actually consider the human condition, what it means to be human, what it means to live well as a human. Previously, the philosophers, today we'd probably call them scientists actually, were more concerned with trying to explain the nature of the world. And so we call those philosophers pre-Socratic philosophers. So there was an era 100 years before Socrates and his work, which we know as the pre-Socratic philosophy, before Socrates, where these philosophers made speculations about the physical nature of the world. It wasn't until Socrates that we got actually philosophers considering what it means to be human. Thus, we could probably refer to the pre-Socratic philosophers more as scientists. So ever since humans have been around, they've tried to explain the world in the way it is and where they fit in. So they made speculations about the physical nature of the world. Over 6,000 years ago, in ancient Greece, the Greek gods were first worshipped. And here we had people, this is obviously a prehistoric and pre-literate society, people explaining the way the world works through myth and through the work of the gods. For example, the well-known myth of Demeter and Persephone. Now, what this myth explains for these people is the changing of the seasons. And the story goes that Hades, you can see him here, the lord of the underworld, the king of all the dead, he fell in love with the beautiful Persephone. And Persephone was the daughter of the goddess Demeter, who was actually Hades' older brother. And Demeter is very important in this story because she was the goddess of the harvest. So she's very important for making sure that the people, the mortals, have crops grow and have food to eat. So Hades, her younger brother, stole essentially his niece, Persephone, and dragged her down into the underworld to be his bride. Now this caused a massive problem because Demeter was distraught, and so she searched all over the world trying to find her beautiful daughter Persephone, and as such she neglected her duties with the harvest. We had a massive famine, and all the people are dying by their thousands. Now this concerned the gods only in so much that if all the people died, there'd be no one left to worship the gods. And so Zeus, the king of the gods, was pressured to intervene with his brother Hades and come to some sort of resolution. Long story short, a deal was struck that Hades reluctantly let Persephone go, but knowing that he needed to follow the orders of Zeus, they struck a deal that for half the year Persephone would remain with Hades in hell, in the underworld, and for the other half of the year she would be in the upper world with her mother Demeter. And this explains the seasons, because in winter, when nothing grows, this is when Persephone is down in the bowels of the underworld with Hades, her husband, and nothing is grown because Demeter is distraught that she has not seen her daughter. And in summer, when the crops do grow, that is the time when Persephone is actually up in the underworld, and Demeter is very happy, obviously, to have her daughter with her, and so the crops grow. And the intervening seasons, spring and autumn, are when Persephone is making her way down to the underworld as the skies darken and things get colder and plants stop growing. She's making her way down into the underworld, and Demeter is distraught because her daughter is going to be down there, and so most of the crops don't grow. And then springtime, as she is making her way up into the upper world, and Demeter is rejoicing. So that's the story of Demeter and Persephone, which for people many thousands of years ago explained the nature of the world, explained the seasons. And that's just one example, but it's a myth that I quite like. And a few thousands of years after that, we come to the 6th century BC. And in a place called Ionia, which is on the eastern coast of modern-day Turkey. You can see Greece here, modern-day Turkey is here, and we actually had Greek cities, Greece really in this ancient world, that encompass not only mainland Greece, but the islands in between Turkey and on the coast here is Ionia. And here we had the pre-Socratic philosophers. They started doing their thinking and started doing their work here in Ionia. They're known as the Ionians. And there's a few that I just want to look at, just a couple of examples, to give you an idea about how people tried to explain the world in the 6th century BC. So prior to that, we had the myths and stories of the gods, and now we have scientists, philosophers, what have you, explaining how the world works. One interesting philosopher from the 6th century BC was Thales. And now, these philosophers, the Ionians, they were convinced that there was like one essential element which everything else was made up of. And Thales was a well-known proponent of this. He said that everything is made up of water. And so what he suggested was that the Earth was like a disk, as you can see here, and floated on water. And this is the known world of Thales's time. We have Europe, we have parts of Asia and parts of North Africa. No concept beyond that. But Thales taught that the Earth was a disk that floated on water. And so that's an example of the pre-Socratic philosophy explaining how the world is. Then things get a little bit more technical. Following on from Thales, we have Anaximander, who may or may not have been Thales's pupil, we're not sure. And he suggested that no, there's more to it than water. It's the opposites. We actually have fire, water, earth, air. And you can see we've got hot here, we've got dry, cold, and wet. But everything is made up of some sort of tension between these opposite points. Something that is in the middle or to the side or up and down. It's a tension between heat and cold, dry and wet. And that would explain everything. You can put everything in there. There's tension between these opposites. No matter what you talk about, you talk about a person, a tree would be somewhere within this praxis here, a tension between those opposites. And Anaximander taught that not only, like Thales, it said that the Earth is a disk, but it doesn't just float on flat ocean, it actually floats on a sphere. And then we have all the planets sort of around that. How far down the sphere goes is not clear. And so that's Anaximander. We've got Thales with floating on the water. Anaximander extends that and says that we've got the opposites as well. And then we have Anaximenes, and not sure when he died, but following on from Anaximander. And he said that the key thing is actually air. And he put out that the Earth is a disk floating in space. And this would encompass all the oceans as well. And the planets, as you can see, they go around the Earth in an arc like so. And so this is the Earth at the center of the universe. So that's Anaximenes. That's the ideas that he has there. And so you've got Thales, you've got Anaximander and Anaximenes, all with different ideas about how the world is. And so what the Ionians essentially came down to is that everything is made of the same stuff. What that stuff is, we're not 100% sure, but everything is full of the gods, that the gods are a part of it. And it's Pythagoras, you may have heard of him, Pythagoras' theorem, who actually flipped that, and he started looking at how the universe is and started to see philosophy itself as a way of life. Pythagoras is probably the most famous of the pre-Socratics. So he actually extended from where the Ionians were to what the universe is like, and importantly making philosophy a way of life. Pythagoras taught that all humans have an immortal soul, and this was a huge step forward in terms of understanding humanity. And Pythagoras and the Pythagoreans who followed him, they believed in reincarnations, and thus they wouldn't eat meat because they might be eating an ancestor of theirs who's been reincarnated as a bull or a sheep or what have you. So Pythagoras actually had almost like a cult following, people called the Pythagoreans. He's probably most famously known now as a mathematician. I think it's a year 11 maths that we all learn about Pythagoras' theorem, and I'm sure that is a very useful piece of information for you. I haven't used it since. But the Pythagoras' theorem, A2 plus B2 equals C2. that the area of A and B equals C, and thus we can work out the distance from this point to this point on the triangle. So that's the Pythagoras' theorem. This length is the sum of these two, which I'm sure you know about and have learned in year 11. But Pythagoras is also, as I said, he taught that, as Pythagoreans, if you followed him, he taught that people had an immortal soul and believed in reincarnation, that when one dies, they are recreated, so to speak. And then after Pythagoras, we have Parmenides, and he taught that change is an illusion. And this is quite interesting. His famous quote is, what is, what is not is not. He said that change is an illusion. Something doesn't change into something else. It is always what it is. It might just be a different thing. And so, how to explain? So, like if you have a piece of fruit and over the days it becomes rotten, he taught that that fruit did not change into that rotten fruit, more that there was separate little stages where there were different representations of the fruit. That's more what Parmenides is trying to say, is that things don't change into something, they are simply that is that then, that is that then, that is that then, that is that then. And so that's Parmenides. What is, and what is not, is not. Then Heraclitus said, no, that's not true. He said change is completely constant. And his famous quote is that one cannot step into the same river twice, because if you step into the river and then you take your foot out and you step into it again, the river has changed. You're actually stepping in a different body of water, and probably different changes, small changes at the bed of the river as well. So he taught that that change is constant. And so you had these sort of contesting views that start flowing down, these pre-Socratic philosophers. So look, we're going to leave it there. That's almost 12 minutes of talking about stuff like that. But it does hopefully give you an idea of. Actually, look, tell you what, we're going to carry on. I've only got a few more to go. So we have Xenophanes. Now, he taught that there was a single, all-known, all-powerful God, and you can imagine the influence that this individual in particular had on Christianity. He said that now there's not only separate gods, there's an all-known, all-powerful God, and the God exists like an abstract force, not a deity that can be replicated in statues and can be worshipped as such. And I like this quote because he often talked about the limits of human knowledge. And this is very interesting for us as we start to look at Socrates. He said, no one knows or will ever know the truth about the gods and everything. For even if one happened by chance to say the complete truth, nevertheless one would not know it. So Xenophanes is really interesting for us because he one single all-powerful God, but the limits of human knowledge are quite interesting as well, that even if we found the truth, we wouldn't know we'd found the truth. Which is quite cool, isn't it? Empedocles, he taught it also about fire and water and air and earth, and he discussed that everything is an attraction and a repulsion. We're pulled towards something, we're repelled by something, and he thought the world could be explained with those two forces there, attracted to that and repulsed by that, and that's where everyone sort of sits between. So you might have examples of love and strife, and depending how Valentine's Day went, you'd be sitting somewhere between love and strife, and so that's Empedocles' contribution, I think, is quite interesting too. Anaxagoras, he said that the sun is fire and stone, not a god, and the moon is a rock. Now, that's really close to what we understand. Science has shown as true. That the sun is a star. It's not a god, and the moon is a rock. That is not a god either. And Anaxagoras, he was put on trial for his beliefs because he was saying there's no need to worship the gods because the sun and the moon, they are not gods. And so just like Socrates was put on trial later on, he was put on trial too, similar to Galileo, who was put on trial for postulating that Earth is not the center of the universe. And lastly, we have Democritus, who came up with the word the atoms, the indivisible, the smallest possible thing that can exist is the atoms, and that's now, modern science has proven it's roughly true, although Ernest Rutherford did work out how to split the atom. So there we go. That was what we have. Those are the pre-Socratics. Lots of different ideas in there. I hope you've got some information from that. Ka pai.